Welcome to Tidslinjen Podcast. Today's guest is Dr. Anthony Chaffee, an American medical doctor and neurosurgical resident who, over a span of 20-plus years, has researched the optimal nutrition for human performance and health. Don't forget to follow us on Spotify, social media, and subscribe to our channel on YouTube.
Okay, Dr. Anthony Chaffee, welcome to the podcast.
No, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, nice to have you here. I've been following you quite a while. Yeah, could you please give a short introduction of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, well, my name is Dr. Anthony Chaffee. I'm an American physician. I currently practice in Australia. I'm a neurosurgical resident, but I also have a private practice in metabolic health and sort of looking at more of a preventative medicine approach, trying to look at root cause disease prevention and even reversal of diseases, of addressing the root cause of a situation and trying to actually cure people of disease and illness as opposed to just papering over their symptoms and giving them a lot of medications that can make them sick in other ways and don't actually address the root cause. So two very sort of divergent fields, but I think they're both very complementary. I think that Western medicine, traditional medicine, is excellent for the acute emergencies that we have, the major illness, injuries and infections and these sorts of things. I think we do an excellent job at. The chronic disease, not so much. And so I think that we have to have a different approach. And so I use a lot of diet and lifestyle interventions in that approach. And then I also like the acute sort of medicine, the surgeries, the life-saving sort of surgeries and interventions that we also need as a mainstay of medicine as well. I go back to Hippocrates, or at least attributed to Hippocrates, who said, people know that the saying that let food be thy medicine, medicine thy food, but lesser known quote attributed to Hippocrates was, before you try to heal someone, first ask them if they're willing to give up that which is making them sick. And I think that is very important and very poignant, that even then, thousands of years ago, they understood that a lot of the diseases and harm that we have and experience as humans is self-inflicted. We're introducing things to our environment, to our bodies that aren't supposed to be there. And so we're getting very sick as a result of that. The natural state of humanity is that of health. The natural state of all life on earth is that of health. And so if we're just getting sicker and sicker and less well, that's because we're inflicting something on ourselves through our environment. So that's my main mission, is to find out that root cause of that environmental impact. I think that it's largely to do with food and eating a species inappropriate diet, a biologically inappropriate diet, something that we haven't been eating as humans for as long as humans have been humans. And getting back to that traditional way of eating is what I found to be one of the most powerful tools in my arsenal as a doctor trying to combat diseases. And so that's what I try to use my podcast and my platform to educate more and more people on that message so that they can just be healthy and not need doctors in the first place.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I'm super appreciative of people like you, because myself, I struggled with a lot of health issues since I was a kid. I used to have very severe eczema. I was 2 years old and my parents didn't know what to do. And of course, like every other parent, they used to take me to the doctors and they used to write out this cortisone. Is it called that in English as well? Cortisone steroid. It's a cream you put on the eczema. It's pretty strong. So they used to put that on my skin. It didn't work that well. They used to force me to take other creams. I even went to this standing solariums, this light therapy. So they really had to try everything. And it helped for a little while. But they always said, yeah, it's something he has to live with. It will never go away. It has nothing to do with the lifestyle or whatever he eats. It's genetic. His grandfather used to have it, the traditional stuff that the doctors say. And I guess the doctors, they're not evil. I don't think that maybe they're not trained to know better, So I discovered people like yourself and Dr. Eric Berg and Doctor's Pharmacy and these other alternative health guys. And I tried intermittent fasting, which I started with, and it helped me a lot. And then I discovered more and more carnivore diets or animal-based diets, and it really helped me get away from the eczema. My weight went down, and the blood pressure, and all other things I used to have. And that got me thinking, going back far away, us humans, how do we know that we really ate meat, and how do we know what's a species appropriate diet? Is there any evidence of that?
Yeah, it's quite a lot. I mean, in fact, all of the best evidence shows that that's exactly what we've been eating. You go back as far as you like. I mean, it goes back millions of years of evidence of us eating meat and actually diverging off from our common ancestors with other great apes about 8 million years ago, because our ancestors started eating more meat. There's evidence of this. Obviously, with tool using, the first sharpened stone tool was about 3.3 million years ago. The oldest one that's been found was about 3.3 million years old, likely from Australopithecus, who could use that sharpened tool to kill and dismember animals. There are signs of butchery on bones, millions of years old, where you have these cut marks, these chop marks. There's certain ways that you would strip muscle off bone when you're butchering it that is very distinct. And so we can see this, and you actually see that exact same pattern in bones that are millions of years old, found in these old human settlements, encampments. They found other sort of human remains, and these stone tools. And so we know that they were using these stone tools to butcher meat and cut through them and use it for that. But also millions of years preceding that, there's evidence that their ancestors were using just rocks as pound stones to crack open the skulls of animals to get at the brains and eat the brains. So we've been eating meat and brains for millions and millions of years, initially as a sort of a scavenger, and scavenging off of the remains. And that's we were smart enough to figure out, hey, we can crack open the skull and we can get at this really nutritious substance in the brain that none of these other animals are able to get to, because it's locked in this hard case of bone. Yeah. And so that was sort of our niche that we could, or that they could get to. And then that evolved and changed, and they were getting smarter and taller and bigger brains and being more sophisticated with their tools, getting sharpened tools. And then it took millions of years, but eventually they adapted into apex predators, so Homo habilis, with the advent of the ice ages, when the ice shelves started coming down. Obviously, this is devastating. Ice and cold kills almost everything in its path. So it's the land of summer and freedom and all these sorts of and plenty was gone, and now you have just ice and harsh winters, and a lot of things died. A lot of the plants died. A lot of the animals died, and a lot of the early humans died. All the pre-humans died. And there's this bottleneck that it was really just the ones that were able to hunt and adapt to that icy conditions as apex predators. Those are the ones that survived, and that's who we're descended from. And so there's this bottleneck period where everybody else who couldn't survive as an apex predator died off, and that sort of forced them to manifest their destiny as apex predators. And the evidence shows that we and our ancestors have been apex predators going back at least 2 million years, if not further. And at that point, you see the evolutionary scale, where sort of the height and brain capacity is going up sort of steadily, and then it hits that point, and then bang, it's this exponential growth in cranial capacity as well as height. And then about 10, 15,000 years ago, with the advent of agriculture and the mass extinction of the megafauna, which was our primary food source, brain capacity is going up, sharp down.
Yeah.
And the cranial capacity and height actually dropped significantly. So the brain size of humans, Homo sapiens, recent Homo sapiens, declined by 11% for adult males immediately after the point of agriculture, and 11% for males and 17% for females. And that didn't happen. That didn't take hundreds of years. That didn't take thousands of years. That was overnight in the sort of the fossil record time frame. And that's persisted until today.
Yeah.
And we see that independently in all these different areas that came to agriculture at different times. They had larger brains and they were taller, and then they get exposed to agriculture, shorter, smaller brains, smaller jaws, crooked teeth, poor dentition, poor wound healing, signs of infection such as tuberculosis in the bones and the fossil remains. And then we're seeing this in real time in the last century with Native Americans, Native Australians, Native Canadians, who up until the late 1800s, early 1900s, were largely eating just meat, if not exclusively meat. And they then switched over to a more Western diet, or at least that was included more and more into their diet. And same thing happened. The height and health of the population declined sharply. So that's some of the evidence. I mean, you can just look at cave paintings. What was important to these people? It was always hunting, 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 hunting. I've never seen a cave painting of a salad or people picking crops or fruit. It's just always hunting, and massive amounts of bones with signs of butchery on them going back millions of years. And just everywhere you see humans, you see piles of bones with marks of butchery and of butchering these animals. You see the stone tools that leaves deposits in the cut marks in the bones that you can say like, yeah, that came from a stone tool. So we have ways of telling that this was actually, we were cutting up animals and eating them. Then there's something called the stable isotope technology, where we look at nitrogen-15, which is a stable isotope of nitrogen. And this builds up as you go up the food chain. So it exists in plants. And so herbivores that eat those plants will get a certain amount of nitrogen-15 in their bones. Mm-hmm. And, as a product of eating these plants and however long they live. And then the animals that eat those animals, they will have a higher level of deposition. They'll have a higher concentration of nitrogen-15. And then the animals that eat those animals will have an even higher level of nitrogen-15. So it's called the trophic level. So that's literally the food chain. Mm-hmm. So as you go up the food chain, you have higher levels of nitrogen-15. And so you sort of think of that as a carnivore rating. How high you are up on that ladder is how much of a carnivore you were, how high up on the food chain of that carnivore chain you were. And now think about this, 70% of animal species are carnivores. And the majority of animals eat other animals, even other predators, like whales and other bears and predators will eat seals, which are also predators that eat fish and other smaller animals. Even herbivores will opportunistically eat smaller animals, little bunnies or ducklings and things like that. You can see those on the internet all over the place, elk and horses and cows even eating those things. So you can look at the trophic level, and humans and early humans and Neanderthals, but Homo sapiens as well as Neanderthals had a higher trophic level, had a higher carnivore rating than every other animal tested. So, we had a higher carnivore rating than lions, hyenas, foxes, and wolves tested at the same time in the same area. And that's because we were probably eating the lions and hyenas and foxes and wolves as well as everything else. And we've actually not even been termed apex predators, but even super predators. No other predator has been as dominant a predator or hunter as we have. We've been able to hunt successfully and consistently every single animal in the air, land, and sea. Nothing else can do that. And we even hunt other predators and eat other predators and apex predators as well. Now, we may get taken out by another apex predator every now and then, like bears and lions and all that sort of stuff. Sure. But that doesn't make us not apex predators. And just because we don't have teeth and claws like a lion does, well, we don't kill things with our mouth and our claws. We use tools, we use our brain, we use tactics. We were scaring herds of mammoth over a cliff for at least 1 million years. There's evidence of that, of these mammoth drops, that technique was still used up until 100 years ago, or 150 years ago with the Native Americans. They would do buffalo drops. They would scare a herd of bison over a cliff, and that would be their food for the year. And I'm sorry, that counts. It doesn't matter how you're able to predate other animals. If you are able to do that and do that successfully, or successfully, then you are an apex predator. And so we use tools and tactics, and so we developed our brains as opposed to our teeth and our claws. And that's why we develop technology, and that's why we live in houses. That's why we're able to have this conversation on the opposite side of the world, because we used our brain as our means of attaining that end, as opposed to our claws and our teeth. And that's why we live in houses and lions don't. And, I'm fine having the house over the teeth and the claws, frankly.
Yeah, for sure. I also saw this documentary about the people in Africa. I think it was the Hadza people or somebody else. They, instead of running after the antelopes, which are very fast, they used to jog until the antelope was so tired that it just froze, and basically let the people kill it. So that's also using your brain. Yeah.
Yeah. And that sort of endurance hunting. The Australian Aboriginals do that as well. I've spoken to some people that do that still here in Australia. They live out in the bush.
Yeah.
And they'll just basically chase something. And they say basically, because they don't sweat properly, they have to pant. We can sweat, and so we can just keep going, and we'll keep ourselves cool. And other animals have a more difficult time doing that. And so they said that, in especially in hot climates like Australia, it's about 1 kilometer. Yeah. It's not that much that you have to chase these things. It's not like you're chasing for all day and night and all these sorts of things. It's about 1 kilometer, and you chase them down, and then they're just like, oh God, what's going to happen? And so I know someone who does hunt that way, and does then finish the job, and then sometimes he just does it and tags them, and just to keep in practice and things like that. But he said, it's typically about 1 kilometer is about as far as they can go. So it's much easier. The Hadza is something that people talk about, the hunter-gatherer sort of thing. But even then, they're still trying to live in a certain way, but that we've traditionally lived in a long time. But some people will look at that and say, well, the Hadza, they eat tubers and they eat honey, and obviously that's what we were eating too. Well, no, not necessarily. In fact, we were, just because they've been forced to adapt and live that way, doesn't mean that that's how people have been living historically. Especially when there was the megafauna during the ice ages, there was no honey, there were no fruits, there were no tubers to speak of at that time. So maybe in some areas at some times, but when you're up in the polar north, when the people are crossing the land bridge from Asia to North America in the Arctic Circle during an ice age, there's no tubers or honey. You're eating meat, and that's it. And we were eating megafauna. We were eating these massive a lot of fat. Well, another thing they'll say is that wild animals don't have a lot of fat, so we still shouldn't be eating high fat. That's not true. We were hunting the megafauna that actually did have a lot of fat. The larger the animal, the higher percentage and proportion of fat you have to the body. And look at these animals in oceans and Arctic circles. You have polar bears, very fatty. Seals are very, very fatty. Whales and those sorts of things. That's what people were hunting up there. And then the mastodons and woolly mammoths and things like that. So that's what we were going after. And it wasn't until the megafauna died out that people had to start doing other sorts of things. We had to start going to agriculture, both animal and plant. And then you have the Hadza who are displaced off their traditional lands. They're not able to hunt properly. They're sort of forced to in a more confined area. They can't just be out hunting big game. And they're just not in the same conditions that they were in traditionally. And so they've had to adapt. So they had to incorporate more gathering than hunting, but that's not actually indicative of what people were doing historically and prehistorically. So it's they're a good example for a lot of things. We can see a lot of these traditional habits, but we also need to remember that is a particular case that is not natural. They've been sort of forced into that position in that situation. So they've had to accommodate. Now they say too, there's just like everything is just about meat. Like, what is happiness? Happiness is meat. Happiness is when we get meat. That's when we're really happy. And so, but the average kill that they get is the size of a bush baby. It's a very small animal. And so because they're just not in their native lands, they're not in their being able to live in a traditional way. So they're sort of forced into eating other sorts of things, these alternative sort of things. Which is important to remember because people make a lot of straw man arguments about the Hadza and what that means as far as what we should do. And so it's important to remember that that's not actually how people have been living for millions of years. It's more recent adaptation because of differences in environment and being displaced off their land and from their traditional forms of hunting.
Yeah. So we can clearly see the difference between how we used to eat and when agriculture came into the picture. Is it that obvious? It just happened like over a generation?
Yeah. So, archaeologists can actually tell the difference between pre and post agricultural skulls. The whole shape and size of the skull is completely different. The jaws are much wider. They fit all 32 teeth in. Everyone's wisdom teeth are fully erupted. They don't have dental cavities. They don't have crooked teeth. They're just perfect dental arches. They're taller. During the ice ages, when people were hunting mammoths, they were actually much taller. They could be range anywhere from 5'10" to 6'4".
How much is that
on
How
average?
much is that in meters? we use the metric system here. I can do a quick Google here.
So 6'4" would be like what, 197?
6'4". I'll see.
You know?
It's 193. Yeah. Centimeters.
93?
Yeah,
No, okay.
193 centimeters.
Is 6'4".
Yeah.
Okay. I thought it was more than that. But either case, because a meter is 6'6", and that's 2 inches back. So yeah, I guess it could be. And so, but yeah. So anyway, tall guys, right? And that's an average, right? So people would be above that as well. The Native Americans in the Great Plains, when they're just eating buffalo in the 1800s, there's a study in 2001 that showed that they were the tallest population of human beings alive on Earth at the time. And that changed immediately after they started eating a more Western diet. And that's something we see in anthropology of these populations when they change from having injuries and infections and those sorts of things to then when they start going into more civilized sort of society, they have the diseases of civilization, which used to be called the diseases of the West. But that's, you don't just all of a sudden start getting diabetes out of nowhere just because, you go to school and you read books. That's not what gives you diabetes and autoimmune disorders and heart disease. And people say, well, they just weren't living that long. It's completely untrue. Its average life expectancy from birth was lower because the infant mortality rate was very high. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that's how that people that were living until they died of old age were dying at early ages. So, in fact, in the Native American records, they by their own self-reporting, they were living to be 110, 115, 120 or more. And I think, well, they're just making that up. They're just saying that. But at the same time, we do know as geneticists now that we are designed chromosomally based on the length of our telomeres to live 120 years on average. Yeah. So, what does that mean? That means if you live naturally and just eat your natural food and don't have something that hurts you and kills you, and if you're not smoking and drinking and killing yourself slowly over decades, that you should make it to 120 without doing anything special, without taking resveratrol and all these different sorts of gimmick medications and things like that. They're supposed to increase your longevity and lifespan. Not that necessarily resveratrol is a gimmick. I have no idea, but there is a bit of a commotion there because apparently no one's been able to I think there was they bought David Sinclair's resveratrol patent for like $700 million, and then they've never been able to reproduce his findings. Huh? And so I'm not really happy about that. So, it could be that it's not all it's cracked up to be. I wouldn't know. I don't really care because, we're dying in sort of our 70s and 80s, and we're calling that good. And in fact, if we were just living to our natural life expectancy, we should get another 4 or 5 decades out of that. So, resveratrol, adding another 6 years just doesn't interest me all that much, even if it were true or not.
Yeah, there's actually stories. There's actually stories I've read about people from the Mongol Empire. That era. The Mongol soldiers, they used to eat a lot, meat-based diet, and they have legends of soldiers living and dying in the battlefield, and they were like 120 years old. And of course, maybe that's only made up, but it can also be true. You never know.
I mean, yeah, they can say that, but that is the historical record. Oh, they're probably just saying that. Maybe,
Maybe. Yeah.
you know. I mean, there's other things of like, Methuselah and Lazarus. I mean, there's people living at 900 years, 1,000 years. I know I probably don't buy that,
Yeah.
But when these people are saying that we live 100 years, 110 years, 120 years, that does sound plausible to me, because there are a lot of civilizations and cultures that say that exact time frame for thousands of years when they're eating predominantly meat diet. And now we know as geneticists, that's how long we're supposed to
Yeah.
live. So that does fit with me. There was Herodotus is the father of historians, and he chronicled interaction between the Empire of Persia and the Kingdom of Ethiopia. And so the delegate from Persia came down to visit the king of Ethiopia, and the Ethiopian king asked him, what do your people eat? How long do your people normally live? And he explained growing wheat and making bread. And they said that our people, the typical age that we live to is 70. And the Ethiopian king laughed at him and said, well, no wonder you live such short lives if all you eat is dirt. We only
Yeah.
eat the boiled meat of our cattle, and we only drink the milk of our cattle, and besides water. And our people would live typically 120 years, sometimes much longer. And so there that is again, that 120 years. That's exactly what we know now we should be living to if you're just living a natural life. We talk about the Mongols, these people dying and having to be killed, and they're over 100 years old. That's not. I mean, we can say that all we want, that this is crazy, but I know a lady in her 80s who's been a carnivore her whole life, and she's 83 years old now. I've seen her; she's still a working rancher. She's up at 5 a.m. every day. Right now, she's calving, so she's up every 2 hours to go and check on the cows and everything like that. And I've been to her ranch. She moves. She looks half her age. She moves like a healthy 30-year-old. I've seen her literally hop over a 5-foot-tall fence to corral an actual raging bull that I wasn't going to get in and deal with, and climb up a pole to grab a rope and come down. And there's nothing but hustle in this woman. Like, I've never seen anyone hustle as fast as she's like, she's not like this old lady creaking around, moving slowly. She's hauling ass all over the place. She's 83 years old. And so, you convert that into a guy who's been fighting his whole life, been an athlete his whole life, working out his whole life. Yeah, I could see that being just an absolute wrecking force on the battlefield. And she's got no sarcopenia. She's extremely healthy. She eats a ton of meat and a lot of fat. And another thing that supports what you're saying and what the Mongols were reporting, the Mongols were carnivores. They ate horse meat, drank horse blood, and fermented mare's milk as the mainstay of their diet. And they carved out the largest contiguous empire that's ever existed in human history, most of Asia, most of Europe, and held it for hundreds of years. And that was on the back of that system. And
they also had an advantage because they had a diet rich in fat and meat, because they used to have dry meat.
Yeah.
And they could go days without eating because they could fast much easier than their enemies, who were like dependent of carbs, and carbs make you more hungry and cranky, and so
yeah. Well, and they were less healthy, and and when you read accounts of that time, they talk about that specifically. The nutrition of the Mongols was much better. They were much healthier. They had more access to, they were obviously just eating meat, and they were much healthier. They were much bigger. They were much stronger, and they could just absolutely dominate in the in the battlefield. But then you go back even further. Go back to Alexander the Great, right? His armies were very disciplined. They had a very, very good system. And so they had something like a 50-1 kill rate on a lot of their battles. And so they're going through and just cutting through armies. The ages of his soldiers, of his foot soldiers, ranged between people in their 20s and into their 60s, right? So what did they do? They had one of the main thing that Philip of Macedonia had, which was Alexander the Great's father. He trained these guys up. So he basically had, when Alexander came in, he just had this prime fighting force ready to go. They're already battle-hardened veterans, right? And so that's why he was able to just do so much damage. They had these like 14-foot long metal spears with a 5-foot long blade on it,
Yeah.
right? And they had a big weight at the back that counterbalanced it. And they had some armor on the front. They didn't hold shields. It was a two-handed thing. They had 5 rows of these people, right? So it had these big long spears, and then a guy right behind it with another spear and another spear and another spear and another spear. So you had to get through 5 rows of porcupine-laden death to get to the first guy, right? They just chewed through armies. But this is a 14-foot heavy spear that you've got wheeled around, and you're going like that. So these guys are in their 60s, trudging along, marching across all of Europe and subcontinent, Northern Africa, just all these massive campaigns. They're walking, right? They're walking everywhere,
all the way to
in
India.
their 60s, and then just killing everybody that they came across. So that's impressive, right? But even more impressive was I was reading about one of the battles about Alexander the Great. It was in a book by Victor Davis Hanson. It was Conquest and Carnage or something like that. Anyway, very interesting book. And he talked about one of his generals, who I believe was head of one of his wings of cavalry, right? So they weren't sitting in tents drawing up plans and sending people off. The generals and Alexander and everything like that, they were at the head of their army. They led the charge. That's how it worked back then. And so Alexander was head of his wing of cavalry, and so he would go swooping through. They had another general, there's head of another wing of cavalry, and he was 78.
Wow.
Leading cavalry charges with a sword and armor, hacking and killing people at 78. Name a 78-year-old that there's not many 78-year-olds that can get on a horse, let alone put on full armor and a shield and sword and not die quickly in a battlefield, right? But that's the thing, your body doesn't need to break down that quickly. Animals in the wild, they don't just break down. They're not getting decrepit and enfeebled and losing their teeth and drooling and getting Alzheimer's and osteoporosis. That's not a normal aging pattern that we see. We see animals in the zoo, if they're being fed their traditional diet, their proper diet, they're just healthy, strong, active adults. And then one day they just sort of slow down. They're not really doing well, and they just go to sleep and they don't wake up.
Yeah.
Right. That's what happens traditionally. You're healthy, active adult, and then you just die because you have to be able to hunt. You have to be able to kill, or you get killed, you get eaten. Right. And so, if you're able to get the food, you're just going to keep going. If they feed these animals what they're not supposed to eat, just like we're eating things we're not supposed to eat, they get the exact same illnesses and enfeeblements that we get. They start deteriorating and breaking down and losing control of their faculties. They get organ dysfunction, like their brains, like their bones. They get osteoporosis. They get arthritis. They get lupus. They get diabetes. They get all the same things that we get. It's all a product of eating something that
it happens to dogs, domestic dogs and cats.
Yeah,
I mean, you don't see wolves in nature getting like arthritis and diabetes, but you see dogs.
Nope.
It's and people try to give them,
but only when eating kibble. They don't get it in the raw meat populations. No. When people feed their dogs, raw meat, they don't get that, or their cats, and they live much longer too.
When would you say people lost this knowledge or these ways? Because agriculture came in around 10,000 years ago, and somewhere along the way, we started to eat wheat and bread. Was it much easier to do that? And because the populations were growing, it's easier to scale up. Was that the reason why we started to eat more crops and forgot about meat, and meat became this luxury only for kings and the elite?
Yeah. Well, that's the argument anyway. I mean, certainly, we it's only been recently that we've tried to vilify meat and say that it was bad for us. Really, in the 1800s, they tried to say that it caused lustful feelings. Really, it caused you to be healthy. And if you're healthy, your body is giving you signals to procreate. But in the puritanical sort of movements and the different sort of religions, like the Seventh-day Adventists, they said, well, that's bad. Lust is bad. Sex is bad. That's a sin. Therefore, meat is a sin because it makes you feel lustful. No, it makes you healthy. And so it makes you want to procreate. When animals in nature or in an experiment or in a controlled environment lose the interest in mating and reproduction, there's something wrong. They're sick. There's a stress there. There's an illness there. So that's wrong. That got vilified. That tried to get vilified in the 1800s, and then it really became vilified when we started blaming cholesterol or heart disease on cholesterol and saturated fat and animal fat. So don't eat it. That's going to cause heart disease, even though heart disease didn't exist before the 20th century in any real great numbers, and we're eating far more meat and far more fat. And no one really put two and two together. Actually, a lot of people did put two and two together, but there was a lot of money in the big processed food industries. And the Seventh-day Adventist Church, who founded the processed food industries like Kellogg's and Sanitarium Foods and others, that were pushing hard on this and spending a lot of money buying off people, researchers, and getting people placed in politics. Like the McGovern report in 1977 was from Senator McGovern of America, and sort of said, oh, we should really limit saturated fat and cholesterol and these sorts of things. This can cause heart disease. That was written by a Seventh-day Adventist church member, right? So it's something with who's conflicted. Dr. Pritikin was a Seventh-day Adventist church member, or at least a professor at their university, and was a great follower and reader of their works. And he pushed a plant-based diet. If you're going to eat meat, just get rid of all the fat and all these sorts of things. And, they're very influential, and they've vilified this. And it's really in the last 50 years that we've said, oh, meat's bad for you. Before that, everyone knew that meat was good for you. Fat was good for you. And that's what was called rich food, because only the rich people could afford it. But everybody wanted it. Everyone knew that it was really important. I mean, that's where the whole spice trade came from. That was during Genghis Khan's time, actually. The spice trade was, the importance of the spice trade was not just like, oh, hey, I want to have a spicy dish. It's just like people were poor, they're destitute. That's not gonna pay the bills. They're not gonna buy things on a frill. It preserved meat, and it covered up the taste of rotting meat, because you had to eat meat. Meat was vital. It was necessary. And if you only have access to rotting meat because you're poor and you don't have refrigeration, you need spices. And so that was what the spice trade was so successful in, why it's so successful in Europe. At least that's what I was taught in when I was taking history. And so, this is something that we've always known, that meat was very important. We sort of filled in the gaps when we couldn't get the megafauna, but areas that could eat just meat did, like the Native Americans. They were just eating bison for 10,000 years after the 10, 15,000 years after the mastodon died off. So they were still able to hunt larger game that had a higher ratio of fat, but other places couldn't necessarily do that. They had to cultivate livestock to, again, and then bigger animals that had more fat, and you bred them for fat. The fatted lamb, all these sorts of things. There's different sorts of breeds that had big deposits of fat, and then they got the dairy from them. They would make butter. That was very important to get more fat, because we need fat. It's a very important nutrient. And some people went to agriculture, but I think that did a lot more harm than good. It could potentially have provided some security, but the thing is that I don't actually think that it's necessary to have agriculture to be to have a civilization and a city and all that sort of stuff. You can preserve meat, you can store it forever. There's pemmican that the Native Americans would scare a buffalo over a cliff, crash and burn. They preserve that meat, and that would last them the whole year. They'd make pemmican, they'd dry the meat, crush it up, and mix it with rendered fat, the tallow, and that's pemmican, and be 80% calories from fat, 2 to 1 grams of fat to protein. That's what they eat the whole year, right? And we found, and armies used to use pemmican as their iron rations for their armies. So the British armies, the Redcoats, during the Revolutionary War in America, they used pemmican. And they found a cache of pemmican, of British pemmican, 50 years after the Revolutionary War. It was still good.
Wow.
It was still edible. It hadn't gone bad, right? So this stuff lasts a long time. So you can absolutely, it's not just grain. I mean, you hit grains, you get rats and mold and all these sorts of, aflatoxins and things like that. The meat preserves just fine. We've been doing that probably for 1 million years plus, because we have evidence of mammoth drops, at least going back 1 million years. So, you drop a whole bunch of mammoths, you're in an ice age, maybe you just have a outdoor freezer, year round, but, otherwise you have to preserve it. And so you have actually large civilizations that actually ate just meat. You have the Plains Indians. There's actually a city, there's about 100 million people in what is now America living there during the colonial era. And then some sort of disease from Europe just wiped out like 95% of the population. And it was really just, it was sort of a very quick event. The eastern colonies, the northeastern colonies, they never tried to branch out, from the 1492 to the 1640s, when the Pilgrims came over on the Mayflower. It was just chock-a-block. I mean, there's reports in the 1500s that these were very big wood-burning people. They had big bonfires every single night, the Native Americans. They said that you could actually smell wood smoke 200 miles out to sea.
Wow.
Right. So it's just like you could go all the way. They said that from Maine all the way down to the tip of Florida, you just sail all the way down. It'd just be fires the whole way.
Wow.
You could see it was just teeming with human life and civilization. And and when everybody sort of died out, that's when they started going, well, where is everybody? Where is everybody? That's actually the story of Thanksgiving, is they came to Plymouth Rock and they were expecting to have all these people there, and there's no one, and they were like, and they were, trying to figure it out. They tried communal farming, and everyone realized real early that, if someone else will do it, I can just reap the benefits. And they almost starved to death. And they went, all right, none of that crap anymore. Here's your land. You don't work, you don't eat. You take care of yourself. And then things sorted itself out. But there was a Native American that had come from that area, and then he had lived in Europe. He'd been a slave for a while. Then he was working in England, as a free man, and he was coming back basically to his roots. And everyone had basically died in the meantime, and he taught them sort of how to survive and make it through the winter. So it was very fortuitous. That's the story of Thanksgiving, the actual story of Thanksgiving. And but everyone was dead, and so they're like, well, what the hell happened? And so people started sort of branching out and exploring out. They never ventured west. There was nowhere to go. That was not accessible. There's just too many people there. They never thought about going out west for 150 years. Now they're like, oh, okay, well, what is it? So they started actually venturing out west, and there's just nothing. There's just nothing. And they came across settlements and cities with permanent buildings and longhouses and
who
cabins
built those,
and houses
who built
and things
those
like that.
buildings?
The Native Americans.
Because I've only seen on TV, like tents, and I've never seen cities. Only in South America I've seen cities. The Mayans and the Incas. Yeah.
So no, you'd have those. I mean, even in the pueblos and like the Southwest and things like that, they'd have brick city built into caves and things like that, and Mexico certainly as well. But no, they had longhouses. Yeah, so they would make longhouses. They would call them longhouses, just a log cabin, really. And what is now St. Louis, they found a city there basically that had these permanent buildings and not like skyscrapers or anything like that, but just these longhouses, right? That was estimated to be able to fit 1 million full-time inhabitants, 1 million. Wow. Right. And they had these trade routes going out in 5 different directions, up to the Great Lakes, out into the plains, down south, out east, all these sorts of things. And they were they didn't have paved roads, right? This is just from walking and having horses and things like that, that it was just, they were just beaten into the ground. There was like these permanent sort of roads that had been just sort of pressed into the earth in all these different directions. So there's these massive trade routes and things like that. So they had a city. They had 1 million people right there. They just ate meat predominantly. They didn't have big crops and agriculture and things like that. There's some areas that had agriculture, but the majority didn't, and especially not in the plains of America where they had buffalo. Same with Genghis Khan. I mean, you have this entire, the largest contiguous empire that just ate meat.
Yeah.
Clearly you don't need agriculture to support cities and to support a massive empire.
Would we be able to do that
Or civilization,
today, for example, to scale up? For example, take New York City, which has millions of people.
Mm-hmm.
How would we even scale up and feed everybody beef, for example? Is that even possible?
It's a lot easier. You get a lot more nutrition out of one cow. You get over like 1 million calories out of a cow, and it's perfect nutrition, right? And you get all these different sorts of things. You get leather, you get bones for other, glue and tools and different sorts of things. The organs are extremely nutrient dense. You can do a lot with those as well. And there's so much that comes out of that. And what makes a cow? What's grass, right? And they actually replenish the nutrients to the soil. It's so funny, we've had animals on the earth for hundreds of millions of years, and yet somehow animals are causing the destruction of the ecosystem now, and never have before. There were more buffalo in North America before we wiped them out in the 1800s than there are cows, domestic livestock cows now. And they're bigger, could create more methane, all these sorts of things than the cows do now. And so, but now we're blaming cows on the environment. Cows are the environment. They eat grass and they recycle these nutrients. And when you get rid of the animals, that's when the land starts to degrade. When you got rid of the bison, we killed them down to like 50. The middle of America, when these explorers were going out west, the land was so fertile that the grass was, they said it was like 9 feet tall. They said they could tie the grass and knot over their horse's head. This is like going through India on an elephant, in these tall grasses, having tigers jump out at you or something like that. That was the middle of America. And the topsoil was so thick, it was like 10, 15 feet deep in some places, right? And then the bison gets wiped out, right? And then in a few decades, we have the Dust Bowl, where from intensive farming, we actually strip out and lose all that topsoil. You're losing 15 feet of topsoil. All of a sudden, the topsoil is gone. It's barren. That was the Dust Bowl, was that there was no topsoil left. They couldn't get things to grow. There was no nutrients left in the soil. And it all blown away, washed away. You had these dust storms that would last days, these locust swarms, all these sorts of things that, it's like out of, Bible story, out of Exodus, the plagues cast on Pharaoh or something like that. Well, they were an agrarian population then too, and they actually turned their land into a desert also. The ancient Egypt, when they made the pyramids, they tested the soil under the pyramids and the Sphinx in the 1990s, and they found that it actually wasn't likely that they were built in deserts. They were much more likely to be built in jungles. They looked like they were jungle pyramids and jungle people. They weren't desert people.
Yeah, I know the Sahara used to be a green area before. I think it's pretty.
It did.
It's pretty. What's the word? There's evidence for it now. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's human settlements and establishments and houses and sort of areas that you look from space with infrared cameras, and they actually see sort of civilizations and cities and things like that all across what is now the Sahara, and then like the large major deserts in the Middle East as well. I mean, that used to be verdant. I mean, that was ancient Babylon. They had the Hanging Gardens of Babylon and all these like amazing gardens and forests. The Epic of Gilgamesh is the oldest written epic. And, so it's thousands and thousands and thousands of years old. It was from that area. And they're talking about how these just green, verdant grasslands with deer and antelope and just teeming with animals and wildlife. And there's a virgin cedar forest, and they go in there and chop down the cedar trees to make a big temple. And they have to fight the spirit of the cedar forest, and they kill it. And they're saying, oh, this is going to actually hurt you in the long run. It's actually kind of interesting, that sort of take. You're sort of destroying nature, and this is going to cost you. And that's modern day Iraq.
Yeah.
And so, that's where agriculture in Samaria and those areas, that's when that was, in the Tigris and the Euphrates, like that was where Iraq anyway, in that area, that's where agriculture started, crop agriculture, and you strip away the topsoil, you actually damage and diminish the land. So it's actually the animals that bring that back. So Dr. Alan Savory is an ecologist, and he has been for the last 30, 40 years, been using large herds of animals, bunched and moving, mimicking a migrating herd, takes them through deserts and actually reversing the deserts and bringing them back to life and making them verdant and hospitable to other animals. And then those other animals come in and it just becomes more and more inhabitable. And we're doing this with regenerative farming, people, rotating their livestock around. All they do is just simply moving. You don't let them eat it down too much. You just move it like a passing herd. It eats it down to a certain amount and then moves on. And that replenishes the soil. The grass actually grows faster as a result of that, and it becomes more nutritious, and you get more out of it. So instead of just having the same piece of land and having the same amount of cows and just let them go to town on it, they'll eat that down. You'll end up putting them on hay. Whereas if you just cut that out into quarters and you just rotate them around, the grass will grow faster.
Yeah, that's we have a farm. We have a farm here close to my house. That's how he does. Yeah, nice. He has the cows on one field 1 year, and then next year he moves them around, and then he grows onions and stuff on that. And that's how he works.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's used to be what they used to do with crop agriculture as well. You had to sort of rotate your crops. So you had different sort of crops at different years, and also you had to at one point let animals come back and just live there and do whatever. You just didn't grow anything on it, or you put your livestock on it, and that regenerated the nutrients in that soil. Even the Bible says that you can grow crops for 6 years. On the 7th year, you have to just let it go and let it go back to nature and let animals go and eat on it and live on it, and then you can start growing crops again. To your question about, is this sustainable for a large population of people? Absolutely. I mean, we have the infrastructure to ship, frozen meat anywhere in the world and, get it anywhere. So we're getting steaks to New York now. We don't have, we don't even have farms, in New York or cattle ranches outside of New York. So we're bringing all that food in anyway. But the main take home and the main thing to understand is that cows and animals replenish the environment. They add to the environment and the ecosystem. They return nutrients to the soil in their defecation and urination. They say, oh, they take all this water. Really? So they just bloat up like a balloon and just get bigger and bigger. And they think, it takes like 600 gallons to grow 1 pound of meat. So like 1 pound of meat has 600 gallons of water in it. Where does it go? It's not 600 gallons of water in 1 pound of meat, right? They pee it out. Yeah. That's it. And so, they're talking about the rainwater that goes on the grass that the cow eats. It's total nonsense. That rain's going to drop anyway, and the grass is going to grow. And it's actually important for the cows to eat down the grass, or else they become dormant and die out and kill out the next grasses for the next year. And that's actually how you get deserts, is when the animals aren't eating down the grasses so that the new grasses can grow up and they're not replenishing the nutrients in the soil. So it's actually very important to do that. And then they eat these things, they get water out of it, or they get water from a stream or something like that. And then they pee it out. They're like mobile watering stores. When they're migrating, grasslands are typically more arid than, jungles and forests. And so you have these animals, and these cows are actually watering out, and bringing back nutrients. So it's actually really important. The main addition to that is that you can run animals basically on any piece of land. You can only grow crops on arable land, and there's very limited amount of arable land, and we're losing topsoil every year. We lose about 27.5 billion tons of topsoil every single year. That's an area the size of the state of Kentucky every year, basically the size of England every single year, right? And possibly just the whole of the UK. But anyway, around that size, it's a big area. It's the size of a European country.
And how do we compensate for that? Do we use manufactured artificial fertilizer, to compensate? Yeah,
we do. But eventually, if you run out of topsoil, fertilizer is not going to do the job either. We're strip mining out the nutrients. The nutrients are already gone. You need to have animals in there to replenish the magnesium and selenium and and zinc and all these other sorts of things, and nitrogen and all these other sorts of things that go into the soil and that go into growing crops. And that's actually, you really can't have plant agriculture without animal agriculture, because a lot of the fertilizers that's used, the best fertilizer is actually comes from animals, the manure, the urine, and the blood and the bone. There's manure, there's fertilizer that's made out of blood and bone meal from the livestock, and that goes back in the soil, and the plants grow on that. And then there's the petrochemicals, but they're only just putting back specific, it's like nitrogen, phosphorus, and something else, and that's why the big petrochemical companies are all for a plant-based diet, and the processed food companies are pushing for the plant-based diet, and the pharmaceutical companies are pushing for a plant-based diet, because they're making a fortune selling it to you, making a fortune treating the diseases that are a consequence of eating that garbage. And the petrochemicals are the ones are in more demand for their petrochemical derived fertilizers. So they're all in on this. All the evil empire, evil corporations are all going after this. I don't think that corporations are in and of themselves evil, but if they are trying to manipulate people to be unhealthy for their profit, I do think that that's evil.
They have shareholders. They want to earn. They want profits. It's pretty normal. The tobacco industry.
It was a bit ghoulish, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just like you're not. You shouldn't be profiting off of other people's suffering. You should be. But that's the thing. If we just understand that this isn't helping us, this is not making us well, then people just won't buy into it, right? It's still a market system. So as long as we understand that this isn't actually helping us, then we just step out of that situation. We just start eating a more healthy diet. Then we're not paying for the garbage food, and we're not buying the medicine that we don't need now. And they have to go and start thinking, okay, well, what can we make that they'll buy? And they'll have to change their product line. They'll have to make something more useful. And I think that's what we have to force them into doing. But as far as sustainability, I know I've gone around in circles, but this is it does come to a point. The arable land is only about, if you're looking at the entire planet, including oceans, arable land is only 4% of the Earth's surface. And that competes with cities. All cities used to be farms. Greenwich Village in New York, that used to be Greenwich Farm. And now they sold that out, and they started putting houses and buildings there. So that's a competing resource, and we're losing tons of topsoil. Yes, that can be replenished, but it takes about 500 years to regrow about a centimeter of topsoil. And so it's a vanishing commodity, and that will be gone before we know it. It's estimated that we have about 50 growing cycles left before the earth is barren, basically. That's not that long. And now we're trying to sprint towards that by making everybody go plant-based. It's insane. It is so short-sighted. Animals, they can run on forest land and rangeland, which make up 25% of the Earth's surface, and do not compete with cities. You can go on the marginal land, the marginal agricultural land. You cannot grow crops on these things. They're all hilly and rocky and all that stuff. Perfect for a sheep, perfect for a cow or a goat, but you can't grow crops on it. And so, that land doesn't get used otherwise. You can't use that for something else.
And my grandfather, actually, he was a shepherd in a country that's called North Macedonia today. Used to be part of Yugoslavia before. He was a shepherd all his life, and he used to go with the sheep, as you say, up in the mountains where nobody had farms, because he could do that, and it's nobody's land in the mountains, so he could go there and feed the sheep, and then they make their own milk and their own yogurt, and so that was his way of doing it. We could do that too here in Sweden, for example. We have large forests, and there's so much land, so it's crazy how they push the plant-based and ruin the soil, and how the good guy, actually the cows who help to fertilize and to keep nature. I don't understand how people don't see that. It makes so much sense, and still people think that meat is the bad guy. I don't know. It has to be a good propaganda machine who does that.
Propaganda works. Look how successful it was in the 20th century. Made otherwise good people think that brutalizing and murdering millions of people
Yeah, yeah,
and in horrific ways was just an okay thing to do. I mean, a lot of these things are still happening. You look at North Korea and their propaganda and what they're putting out, and their people just don't even know about the rest of the world. They don't know what's going on and then they sort of escape and this, oh, thank God I'm out of
yeah,
there. But it's they tell you about the horrors of inside. But you can do a lot. You can do a lot to people with
yeah.
propaganda, and this misinformation.
I think also I have a theory about it too. I spoke to Niklas Gustafsson yesterday about it. I think they've made us carboholics, if that's a word.
There's
Yeah,
that too.
because they
Yeah.
start from a young age. They feed us oatmeal and jams and bread, And I think carbs, refined carbs, they hit a special part in the brain, maybe dopamine and stuff, and it makes you a carboholic. You get addicted to it because I've been addicted to nicotine, for example, and I feel the
Mm-hmm.
same. In Swedish, we say abstinence. Abstinence. I don't know if that's an English word, but if I eat
Yeah.
only meat for maybe 3-4 days, then I feel this urge of having carbs. And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people say, "Oh, I can't eat meat all the time. It's boring. I want to have bread sometimes." And I think it's because we have this inner craving, that they created when we were small, when we were kids, with candies, and
Yeah.
so I think it's very hard. It's like having a population of 10 billion being addicted to drugs, and then all of a sudden, you
It
tell them
is.
that now
Yeah.
you can't have any drugs, only water and tea.
Yeah.
I think we're in a very hard position because I think most people understand that meat is healthy. They just use it as an
You
excuse
know.
sometimes, that it's boring.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we do have that relationship with food that we do with drugs. Like I say, oh, that's boring. Oh, I want something
Yeah,
entertaining. I want something different. I want that cake. I want that this. It's just like we're going for the experience, that taste experience, as opposed to just nourishing our bodies, which is what we're supposed to do. That's what food is. It's not entertainment. It can taste good because you're getting a natural response. Your body's telling you, yes, we want those nutrients. Here's a reward for that. And this is what, things that taste bitter or taste bad, that should warn you. I mean, that's your brain trying to warn you that there's something bad in there that you shouldn't eat. But so you should enjoy it. If you're not enjoying meat, then that means you're not hungry. Your body's telling you that you don't need those nutrients just yet.
but what's
And
interesting?
so
Sorry,
you don't
sorry
need to
to
eat.
interrupt you there, but
Mhm.
bitterness and all this is a warning to not eat. But that's where I
Mhm.
get confused because the sweet is very tasty, and we know
Mhm.
that sugar is
So
bad. So why is
yeah,
that? It's very strange.
yeah. So that's the difference, right? So it's not that everything that tastes good is necessarily good for you, but if something tastes bad, it's likely that it's bad for you. Sugar is what's called an evolutionary trap. So different carbohydrates. I mean, you can chew on wheat. There's a lot of starch in there. It doesn't taste
No.
sweet. It doesn't taste very good at all. It's very bland. Glucose is very mildly sweet. Fructose is extremely sweet. And that is because we recognize that as safe. We don't know of really anything that contains fructose that is acutely poisonous to humans that will kill you that
Hmm.
day. Now, citrus and other fruits will still have toxins in them, but they're ones that we can handle more readily. And so we recognize that. The thought is that evolutionarily, those of our ancestors who were able to sort of have that sweet taste, like, ooh, that's something safe. They just recognized that was something safe and that they could eat. Also, it's going to give you a quick hit of energy. It's going to give you a bit of insulin resistance and cause you to store a bit of fat. That could be very helpful in the winter. But this is something that was available for 2 weeks out of the year. You have fruits and berries that were available for 2 weeks out of the year. They were seasonal. They were local. They weren't available everywhere. Honey, you're not having honey farms and things like that where you can just buy buckets of these things. It's every now and then you had to fight bees for that. And you could die from bee stings. You had to figure out how the hell to get past the guards to get this honey. It wasn't a simple thing. And So that was in limited supply, but we recognized that as, oh, okay, that's something safe. So it's called an evolutionary trap. And so now we have this thing in abundance, and our brain's getting that, ooh, this is safe signal. This is going to give us energy signal. And so more. But it's also very addictive. It can give a dopamine signal to the brain that's very strong and can actually kill parts of your brain by overexcitation of your neurons. And can actually, there's studies in humans with MRIs looking at people that are addicted to like methamphetamines and those who are addicted to sugar. And they found that the same areas of the brain died to the same extent. And so it's actually quite bad. And people say that, I've seen people say, well, yes, sugar gives a dopamine response to your brain, but, so does giving someone a hug. Is that addictive? And it's like, it's not the same amount, right? Because you're getting this constant stimulus, and dopamine is an excitatory molecule for your neurons. And the more you turn your neurons on, the more they damage themselves. They're actually damaging your neurons as they're on. We're all getting low-grade brain damage as we're awake, and then you have to sleep and recycle and rebuild these things. And so if you're constantly turning these things on, you don't let it rest, they die eventually. And so we can see that on MRI. You give someone that doesn't have any of these substances in their bodies, you give them a dose of amphetamines, like Adderall or something like that. And these areas of brain, functional MRI was light up, right? And you give that same dose to a meth addict, it barely twinkles.
Wow.
You give that same dose to a sugar addict, same barely twinkle, right? So, hugs aren't going to do that to you, right? So it's not the same thing. So that's an evolutionary, that's what we call as an evolutionary trap. So there's something that says, ooh, this is good, have this. And then we don't stop. There's like in hummingbirds is a good example of this. There are these little plastic caps that were on these electric fences on farms and things like that, that sort of keep animals out or animals in. And some of them were red, and it just looked like the type of flower that they would eat. And so it's like, oh, this red thing is kind of the right shape. And they go in and they stick their little beak in, they hit the electric wire and drop dead. So we're just finding these, mass graves of little hummingbirds underneath these things. So they had to figure that out, and they changed the color, and then they, stopped the problem. So that's our evolutionary trap. Now, food scientists are very clever, and too clever for their own good, too clever for our own good, because they identify different molecules and different compounds that give us that, ooh, that's good for us signal. Yeah. And so they'll combine like the sugar, fat, and salt, those sorts of things. Those combine into a cheeseburger. This is everything you need. Exactly. And so that's giving that signal. And then they take those little tastes and those flavors, and they give you that big sort of taste explosion. But they design these chemicals to then go away quickly. So that taste, you get this big burst of flavor, and then it goes away very quickly. Yeah. And so you want another one and another one. You keep chasing that. Our body chases nutrients. It doesn't chase calories. And you have sensors in your stomach that track up the vagus nerve to your brain. And you can actually tell how many nutrients are in your stomach. And so you're eating potato chips that have no nutrients to speak of, but they have that evolutionary trap. So, oh, that's good for me. That should be something good. And you eat that and you swallow it. It goes in your stomach, and your stomach's like, there's nothing here.
Yeah, keep going. Funny you say that.
And so you keep eating.
Because I've noticed if I eat meat, for example, I can eat 300-400 grams, and then I feel full. Like I get a signal, even if I want to eat more, I can't. And I feel the same way. I know you don't eat fruit, but sometimes I have an apple or two. But even when I have like two, 3 apples, I feel full. I don't want to eat more. But like you say, if I eat a bag of potato chips, we have a lot of like Swedish candy here, other sweets. I can just keep eating. I can eat, and I don't have a limit. There's no signal going to my brain that says, okay, stop it now. Like even pasta and bread, I just keep eating. It's crazy. So there is actually these scientists, they hijack the system. Is that correct?
They did, but also we have to think this from a hormonal aspect as well, because when you eat these carbohydrates, it raises your blood sugar. Blood sugar is actually toxic over a certain level, and our body really regulates that below that certain level. Above really 4 grams of glucose throughout your entire circulatory system, that's enough. Just 4 grams is enough to run all the physiological processes of your body and your brain and all your organs. So it's not much. And you get as little as 5 grams, and that's now a toxic load. And your body responds to it as a toxin by trying to detoxify it by raising your insulin to try to get that down. Now, that's a problem in and of itself, because insulin affects over 100 different physiological mechanisms in your body, including hormonal health and autophagy. It stops autophagy. It disrupts hormones and blocks growth hormone, lowers testosterone in men, lowers estrogen in women, all sorts of other sorts of problems, and literally over 100 different things. And so when you elevate it to try to keep your blood sugar down, because that's the acute emergency, that's the fire that you have to put out, you're getting collateral damage by raising your insulin. So now your insulin is elevated and it's affecting everything at an elevated rate. And that's actually causing harm in and of itself. But it's also one of those mechanisms that stops your body from being able to mobilize your fat stores. So it forces energy into cells. It doesn't allow it to come out of cells. And so now your fat cells are all locked down and you can't actually utilize them. And so your blood sugar drops. And you want it to drop on below 4 grams, but now it's dropping too far because insulin has a long half-life and it stays up elevated for a while. Now it's too low, and now you can't elevate it back. Normally, you'd have normal blood sugar, normal ketones, normal glycogen, because you just make them. I haven't eaten carbs that didn't exist in meat or dairy for going on 7 years now, and you can hear how much energy I have. I'm sort of yapping a lot, but you make all this stuff, but you're not able to when your insulin is up. And so it's your blood sugar goes down, you feel rotten, so you want to eat more carbohydrates. So you keep eating and you keep eating and you keep eating, and you sort of get into that sort of addictive pattern of eating, where you sort of compulsory sort of eating. But it does other things that are more insidious, which is one of the things that insulin does, is it blocks a hormone called leptin, which is our satiety hormone. It tells us when to stop eating. And it can come from our stretch receptors in our stomach. So you get that bulk. This is why they said eat a whole bunch of fiber, because it'll stretch that out and you tell your brain that you're full, even though there's no actual nutrients in the leafy greens and fibrous plants that you've eaten. But that never really worked. People were still hungry. They were just bloated and miserable because, again, their stomach tracks in nutrients, and they saw there was no nutrients there. Most of the leptin comes from your adipose tissue, from your fat cells. And that goes to your brain and tells your brain how much energy you have. It's like a running gas gauge. And so when insulin blocks that, your brain gets a signal that you have 0 energy reserves. And now your blood sugar is dropping. So it sends out a panic signal that says, if you don't eat now, you will die. And this is why we panic eat 3 times a day, and people get hangry. Oh my God, I'm hangry. I have to eat. I have to eat. There's people on YouTube and TikTok, and we laugh at them. They're just like, people, all their friends are laughing at them, just freaking out. But, to them, it's very real. It's very visceral. Their brain is telling them they are going to die, that this is an emergency, that they have to eat. Why is that? We're all bloated and overweight generally, right? So we're clearly not dying. We clearly don't have to eat. Yeah. But that's the signal our brain is giving us. Our brain is telling us that you are going to die, if you don't eat something. And so it's very powerful. It's a very powerful visceral feeling, and we overeat for that reason as well, not just because of the compulsive taste aspect, but also because of the disruption of our hormones as well.
Yeah, it's crazy. And is that because we eat processed foods and not like natural foods? I mean, I don't think fruit. Yeah,
it's part of it.
Part of it. And so we shouldn't even eat like fruits. You're not recommending to eat fruits or berries or.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that if you had an apple tree, and you had apples for a couple of weeks out of the year, probably not that big of a deal, right? It's seasonal, it's local, right? You're picking it ripe. That's really important. When those seeds aren't ready, the plant doesn't want anything to eat it, so it's rock hard. And it doesn't taste very good. And it actually has toxins in it. Fruit does have toxins. Most fruit will kill you. It's like, well, it's a fruit. The plant wants you to eat it. No, the plant wants something to eat it, not necessarily you.
Yeah.
And most of these fruits have actually evolved with birds. The cassowary bird in Australia, for example, and elsewhere, it's a frugivore. It only eats fruit. There's about 150 different fruits and berries that the cassowary bird eats. Every single one of those will kill you.
Wow.
Every single one will kill every single animal except a cassowary bird. Because if those seeds don't pass through the digestion of a cassowary bird, they won't germinate and turn into a plant.
Okay.
So it is necessary for the survival of that plant species to only pass through the digestion of a cassowary bird, to only be eaten by a cassowary bird. So it needs to be very, very toxic and detrimental and deterring to other animals eating it. And it has to be very appealing to the cassowary bird. And they sort of co-evolved together. When a cassowary bird leaves that area, those plants die out.
Okay. They follow the bird.
Right. And so
they follow the bird, basically.
That's it. Because if those plants are just dropping their fruit and they're not being eaten by a cassowary bird, then those seeds will never germinate.
Wow.
They have to have the cassowary bird, and a lot of birds and fruit and berries have evolved like that. Think about it. You go out in the woods and you start just seeing random berries you've never seen before, weird bulby things on a tree. Are you going to eat them? It's a fruit. No, you'd be very foolish to eat those sorts of things. You probably get very sick or die. Especially these berries, those are traditional things. You don't eat the red berries. Those are telling you like, warning, this is going to kill you, sort of thing. So no, the fruits that we commonly eat, these have been cultivated, these have been changed. These are not the natural apples and oranges and mangoes that existed in nature. They're much more sweet. They have much higher levels of fructose and sugar. And they're just very, very different. Also, when they're not ripe, they do have toxins. It's just the toxins in things that are sweeter, that have more fructose, are things that we can generally contend better with. But like a grape, grapes are fine, right? Well, they'll kill a cat, they'll kill a dog, right? So there are toxins in it, right? And there are tannins in wine. We know that tannins are, bind to protein, denature them, and cause other sorts of problems, right? How do the tannins get in the wine? They're in the grapes, right? So these are part of the toxins that exist. When a plant is or when a fruit is green, when it's not ripe yet, there's a much higher burden of toxins in there because the seed's not ready. So like, I don't want anything to eat this. The seed's not ready, right? And so when it ripens, the plant actually pulls out those toxins. If you pick that unripe, those toxins remain in the fruit. There's nowhere for it to go. It's a closed circuit.
Yeah, because bananas are picked green, for example.
Everything's picked green, right? I mean, when was the last time you saw an avocado that was ripe?
That's true.
In this store?
That's true. Yeah.
So and so like avocado they'll kill dogs and cats too, but they'll have 4 times the level of oxalates when you pick it green. And there are studies in tomatoes showing that when you pick tomatoes green, they retain the toxic load. Then they don't, even when they ripen in the box, they don't reduce that toxic load. So, if you had your own fruit tree and you had fruit for a couple of weeks out of the year and you picked them ripe, and you had the rest of the year to sort of get that sugary stuff out of your system, you're probably going to be okay. But, we're falling into this evolutionary trap. We're, you're in Sweden, which is, a very cold place. You're not going to naturally be growing mangoes and
we have
kiwi
raspberries
fruit every day, right? And raspberries, you need to ship these in from thousands of miles away. And people talk about, you have to go green by eating plants. I mean, you're talking about shipping plants that don't exist in most climates, thousands of miles, using all these fossil fuels to do that. And you think that that's better than eating a cow that's down the road? Probably not.
I agree.
And and so you're in Sweden and you're eating sweet fruit every day. That's an unnatural sort of predicament. Like if you had a fruit tree or some blackberries or something like that around your area, and you just sort of had those when they were ripe, that's going to be a bit different. But the fact is that we overindulge in these things that were generally typically not available more than a couple weeks out of the year. And we were eating them ripe, we're eating them locally. And in a lot of areas, they didn't exist at all,
Oh.
Especially during the ice ages. They just weren't any. And so we certainly don't need them. If you want them, that's one thing, but I don't typically recommend them because you don't need them. And especially when you're eating an abundance of these things, I think that can cause a problem. The fructose itself causes a problem. The fructose itself can cause fructose itself blocks leptin, and it upregulates ghrelin, which is the hunger signal. That sort of counters leptin. It can cause insulin resistance. It is broken down and processed into the same byproducts in your liver that ethanol does. It goes down the same pathway, and so it ends up having the same byproducts and the same damage to your liver and to your body. You get fatty liver disease, cirrhosis, diabetes, heart disease, even implicated in cancer and Alzheimer's, and autism and other sorts of neurodivergent, neurodevelopmental sort of delays. So, it's not good for you to have an abundance of this stuff day after day after day, year after year. Just like it's not a really good idea to smoke cigarettes day after day, year after year, or drink alcohol day after day, year after year. These are things that we can tolerate in short durations, but they're not something you want chronic exposure to. I think we do have this drug relationship with food where we're eating this for the enjoyment factor of this. I say, well, I couldn't really just eat meat. That's like saying, well, I couldn't just drink water. I need alcohol. I couldn't just drink alcohol. I need to do meth. It's just like, well, that's just too boring.
Yeah.
I want to live my life. Why do you want? And then people say too, it's just like, why don't you have one life? Why don't you enjoy your life? Why don't you just go out and eat whatever? It's just like, if your entertainment and enjoyment in your life just comes from eating random shit food, like, your life sucks. I'm sorry. Probably. Like, you need to get a life. You need to enjoy the actual what life has to offer you. I saw someone say that. They said that, if you're only eating meat, like, wow, that just sounds like a really, really boring life. And I said, if your main entertainment is coming from eating different foods, like, your life is boring. Like, I'm sorry to tell you, like, that your life is boring as hell. I eat food so that I have energy, so I feel good, so I can go and do things. I can go to the beach, I can go work out, I can work, I can spend time with family and friends and actually do things. My entertainment and enjoyment doesn't come solely from eating food and just stuffing things in my face. My entertainment and enjoyment comes from doing things. And that's a very big difference. It's interesting you mentioned the carb addiction side of things, because that was something that Lear Keith said, that she wrote a book. She was a vegan for years, vegan activist for years. And then she sort of had the wool pulled off her eyes. She went, wow, this is all wrong. And this was all lies. So she wrote a book called The Vegetarian Myth. And she goes through all these sorts of things. Very interesting lady. And now she's like full carnivore. She only eats meat. She's come full circle and she feels so much better. And she talked about how this is so much better for the environment and better for people and better for the animals. And that was one thing that she argued, was that agriculture, she doesn't think that this actually perpetuated civilizations, because we have civilizations elsewhere and that were perfectly fine without this. But she thinks it's from that carb addiction. You had people that were started eating these things, they were getting carb addicted, and they liked that and they wanted more of it. So they started growing more of it and growing more of it for that addiction. And we're growing tobacco, and we're growing opium, and we're growing poppies, and we're growing all these sorts of things to meet that addiction side of things. And that's what she said, thought it was. And I think it's an interesting argument. I mean, you see, I named a couple examples of, like, the Plains Indians or the Native Americans that were just eating wild meat. They had cities that could hold 1 million people. Genghis Khan, the Mongol horde, largest contiguous empire. But, they say it's like, well, when you have leisure, when you have like a leisure class, you can have a full-time standing army, and you don't have to like work and do all these sorts of things. Now, first of all, the ancient Greeks didn't have like a full-time standing army. They had the citizen soldiers, that you had your land, and you grew whatever crop and animal and meat and whatever. But then you could afford this heavy armor, and that's where the hoplites were actually these citizen soldiers. They weren't just full-time people. That was typically not a typical thing. But Native Americans in Washington State on the Columbia River is a big river. It has a massive salmon run. Certainly did historically. If you consider, so the way they sort of consider, the wealth of a civilization is the amount of leisure time they have.
Yeah.
And so the amount of time that they have to spend doing all the different sorts of things that they have to get done, and then what time is left over for them to just hang out and philosophize and do whatever, and think deep thoughts and fight each other and do whatever the hell they want to do. Drugs usually for most people that are bored. But so they estimated, or at least some group did, that the wealthiest civilization that has ever existed based on that principle was this population of Native Americans living on the Columbia River prior to the 20th century, because they just had these weirs set up, these sort of nets across the Columbia River, and it would just catch just thousands of fish all the time. So all they had to do is just go out and grab some fish, cook it up and eat it. The rest of the time was theirs. So they had the most free time, most leisure time to think deep thoughts, philosophize, do whatever the hell they want to do, come up with, that, and that's the idea is that, well, you have leisure time, you have a leisure class that can think about things and write about it.
Yeah.
They absolutely had that. You had the native, they had a buffalo drop. There was a lot of work for several weeks and real hard times. And then they had food for the rest of the year. What do you want? I mean, it's nothing but leisure time. So, I don't think I don't think you need agriculture for that. I think that it actually hurt us if anything.
But in a way, in a funny way also, I think agriculture, it had its downsides, but I also think it freed time for people, for philosophers, and to come up with inventions and literature and all this philosophy. I think agriculture had that effect as well, because people had more time, because you worked maybe hard in the morning, and then at evening, I mean, you didn't have to watch the crops grow. You could go in and have some beer and sit around the fire, and discuss ideas.
Yeah. Well, but you could do that with animals as well. Like the Native with the fish. They could just, all they were doing was hanging out, and the buffalo, they had food for the rest of the year. The Mongols, I mean, Genghis Khan had a number of people. I mean, because you had a ruling class as well, and you had all the people doing the things, and then that sort of funneled up to the top. But also, I mean, when you're out with your sheep out in the fields, you got a lot of free time, and to think about things. Patrick Stewart, the actor, very famous actor, Jean-Luc Picard, and play a very Shakespearean actor. He was a shepherd as a kid, and so he would take his sheep out, and as he was just out there up in the hills, or wherever he was in the UK, he would read Shakespeare. So he did just all day, and he would act out the plays, and he would just read it. And he had all this time, because the animals are just animals. They're just doing their thing. So he had all this free time, and that's how he chose to spend it, was bettering himself, bettering his mind, and reading Shakespeare and literature and poetry, So I think that just agriculture in general can do that, animal and crop agriculture, and just having those systems of civilization actually beget a leisure class. And you can do that with both animals and crops. And even in hunting, if you have this abundance of food available, you just do big hunts, you take down a mammoth. How much leisure time did those people have? Constant. They didn't have to hunt every day. They take down a mammoth that feeds their tribe for the year. They have a whole herd that goes over. That's an entire, nation is fed for the year, and then they have time to do that. It's, the written word made a big difference, but that's a whole other thing too. In ancient Greece, they thought that was a really bad thing, because people had perfect memories back then. They had to memorize everything. So, the Iliad and the Odyssey, these are thousands of pages of perfect, beautiful, poetic verse that were composed in someone's head, right? That they didn't write that down. This was before the written word. This is prehistoric. And so they passed it down by oral tradition. And so they had to have perfect memories. And so that was the argument. It was like, hey, this writing things down is a bad idea, because it's going to make people lose their memories. We won't have, if you can just write something down, you don't need to remember it. This is a bad idea. This is going to hurt us. And, think about how much we've come now. We have iPhones, and we just look anything. You don't need to remember
no,
anything.
no phone numbers, nothing.
I mean,
I used to know before the cell phones.
nothing.
I used to know everybody's phone number. Yeah. Now
That's
I
it.
don't know. I don't even know my
Yeah.
wife's phone number anymore.
Yeah.
It's true story.
Yeah, that's an area for of issue with my girlfriend. She's made it a point to memorize my number, and she like lets me know about it every time I ask her, "What's your number again?" She's like, "God damn it."
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's the thing. I mean, when I was a kid growing up, I knew everybody's phone number just off the top of my head, and every now and then I was like, well, what if I forget the numbers? I should write these down just so I have them. And I would just write down every number of every person I could think of. And I would get 140, 150 numbers. And it used to be obscure people that I hadn't called in years necessarily, I know maybe 4 now, I know my first phone number as a kid. I know my second phone number as a kid when we moved up from California to Seattle. And I know my parents' number now, and I know my number now.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Right. And I know my Australian number, and I know my US number, and that's it. I don't even remember my European number when I was living there for a decade. I don't even remember my number from that, and so it's bad. And I think it has hurt our memory. So it could be that, when you could have a lot of these great philosophers, you can have a lot of these great thoughts, but if you don't pass it along with the oral tradition, and you don't write it down somewhere, that gets lost as well. So, I mean, we could have had some of the most beautiful, brilliant poetry and philosophy coming that has just died and gone away. Probably has. I mean, if you think about like the different sort of myths that have come along, these are oral tradition that's been passed down likely hundreds of thousands of years, if not more. Think about fire. Every culture has a fire myth about how this came down. Prometheus stealing fire from the gods, and Zeus saying, no, that's going to make humans, their power rival the gods. We can't give them fire. And how this was like, look, they're suffering. Like, life sucks down there. They're just living in dirt and mud, and there's just misery. Give them fire, and they have fire. And they brought them out, and they're this, it's just changed, revolutionized human existence. We have records of fire. We know that goes back at least 800,000 years. And there's actually newer evidence showing that it's likely at least 1.5 million years. And my friend, Professor Bill Schindler, is a professor of archaeology and paleoanthropology. He thinks that it's likely that we've had it about 2 million years, because when the ice sheets started coming down in the ice ages, Homo habilis went up north into the ice. They didn't run away towards the equator. And he was just like, that's really hard to do if you don't have fire. Or they were
just stupid.
They were stupid, but they were the ones who survived, right? They were the ones who lived. All the other pre-humans died. But that's also where the mammoths were. Now you can get mammoth coats and things like that. So maybe that's how they did it. But, fire would help. But at least 800,000 years, likely 1.5 million years or more. So that's at least 500,000 years before Homo sapiens even existed, right? That we've had fire. So that oral tradition of what it was like before fire and after fire, that carried its way down for at least 500,000 years, if not 1 million plus years, or 1.5 million years, right? Or really 800,000 years to 1.5 million years. That's crazy. And that oral tradition would have been from, people that were pre-Homo sapien, Homo erectus, and potentially even Homo habilis, right? Would have had, they'd have modes of communication, and similar to ours, but not necessarily as robust. And that passed down. So there was a time in living memory that someone's grandfather grew up without fire, and then it was invented in his lifetime, and he's passing down to his grandkids like, you have no idea what this was like. This just sucked. Like you just don't get it. And just describing an entirely different epoch to somebody.
It's like us describing the world before internet to our kids. They don't.
Before internet, or look at the difference between the revolution, the Civil War in America, just cannons and charges with bayonets and things like that, and then a couple decades later, you have World War I. It's the first major mechanized warfare, where you have flamethrowers and mustard gas and airplanes and bombs and munitions and tanks and all these sorts of things. Crazy. I mean, that was a complete paradigm shift as well. And that was a lot for people. That's why I call it the war to end all wars. Is like we just can't do this anymore. This is too much. And then we got over it, and we in World War II, and we're just still going strong. But that was a big change for people mentally. About that different. Or there was a gentleman that I remember hearing about. He was like 100 years old or something like that. And 100 something years old. It was a African-American gentleman who was born during the time of slavery. And I think he had been born a slave. The Civil War was then sort of when he was a teenager. And so he ended up being, freed after that. And he ended up dying, after the moon landing, like in the 70s, so he saw all of that. He saw the difference between going from, agrarian,
it's crazy,
countryside to then this postmodern world and space travel and landing on the moon. That's a crazy period of time.
It happened really fast. I know my grandmother was born 1924, and she used to tell me stories when the Germans came, when they came to Yugoslavia. Crazy stories,
Ugh.
And it's not that long time ago. Yeah,
No, it's not. Yeah, it's very recent, and people forget that very quickly, unfortunately, which is scary because those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it, and that's not something I want to repeat.
Yeah, and
ever.
That's even the name of my podcast, but in Swedish, it's called The Timeline. In Swedish, it's Tidslinjen, and it's called that because I think to understand the problems we have, today, I think we have to go back in time, to understand. So that's my perspective.
Cool. Definitely, it's a good perspective.
Okay, Dr. Anthony, but I don't know. Maybe we have to end the conversation soon. I don't know if you have any more time. I certainly have some kids that I have to pick up soon. Probably
good to
because I could talk about this topic for hours. It's very interesting. Yeah, and I try to spread the word because I'm not 100% carnivore. I try to, but I'm one of these carboholics, and it's really hard to go away from that. But I'm trying, and I try to spread the word because a lot of people close to me, they're getting sick, and other ones, and they don't really get the power of food. I try to do my best, and I try to spread videos from people like you and other Dr. Sean Baker, who's also a carnivore, other similar. I try to spread your guys' videos, but it's really hard to convince people. It's sometimes they have to realize it themselves. It's really hard to tell somebody to do this and do that. Like with kids, adults, we're like kids. Basically, we're just bigger. So it's easier to make people realize themselves. Yeah, definitely. Before we go, where can people find you? You have, I know where to find you, but where can people find you?
Yeah, well, so I have a YouTube channel and a podcast. My YouTube channel is just my name, Anthony Chaffee, MD. I have, all my videos go up there. They also go up on Rumble as well if people want to go there. Same name. My podcast is just called The Plant Free MD, and I'm pretty strict, no plants and just fatty meat. But at the same time, I don't think everyone, has to do that if they don't want to. I think they'd be better off if they did. But, my main message is that meat is not bad for you, that this is good for us. And that for people to understand that plants actually have pretty good defenses and they're chemical in nature and they can harm you. And so just to be aware of that, if you want to eat plants, then that's your business, but at least be aware that these toxins exist so that you're not just blindly going into something and not aware of it. So I try to talk about those sorts of things and just to bring that awareness, and especially to the medical community and to patients, because this is a major driver of disease. And so I try to talk about those sorts of things in a medical context, but do it in a way that can both be appreciated by doctors and be robustly evidenced so that they can actually apply this to their patient populations as well as themselves and with good confidence, but also accessible to patients so that they will understand this and be able to use this and utilize this in their life as well. And I have Instagram channel. That's sort of my main social media. And it's just, again, my name, Anthony Chaffee, MD. And Twitter's like Anthony_Chaffee. So those are my main ones. I have others, but those are the main ones. And people can find sort of the other ones through all that.
Cool. Okay. Well, thank you once again. I appreciate it. And thanks for having the time to talk with me and spreading the word. Yeah.
Well, you're very welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks. Bye-bye.